Go, Mike. And we want the level to be a little bit bumped up, just so that it can pick up my voice. And there we go. All right. So let me close the applications that I don't need, and focus on what I want to talk about today. So what I did at home was I set up the virtual machine, for this class to have Snort already installed. So I can go through that process, just to show you guys, how to get it done. And the virtual machine, I have exported it already into this folder. The extension is OVA, and it's gonna be, I will use VirtualBox to open it and import it into the current installation. So file, import, and then pick up that folder. It's under, for Windows, ciss342. Open that. And the important part is where I'm going to import it to. No, doesn't give me a choice. There won't be enough space to import it completely. We'll see. Because the import process needs to recreate, the disk image file, so that might take a little bit more space than I have on my persistence drive. So we'll see. We'll take a look, see if this is successful. And I can tell whether I still have space or not, because I don't want to affect my recording either. Persistence has 2.4 gigabytes left. 2.3. As it is compressing, it's chewing up more and more space. I don't think I have enough space to do it in the default folder, so I'm gonna close this. So I can't use this for demonstration purposes, because it doesn't seem to let me control where to import the application. Oh, okay, I can change the default machine folder. So I'll go ahead and change this to another folder. And here is a 11 gigabyte volume. So I'll just go ahead and use it over here. And then re-import it. Import from here. Double check the amount of space I have here, make sure that I'm not chewing up any space here. So the persistence drive, now it has 3.2 gigabytes left, so that's good. All right. Okay, so I have to finish this process first, to import my virtual machine, because the settings are related to VirtualBox, so I can't really proceed to talk about anything else until I'm done with this step. It's really fast because I'm importing from my external hard drive onto an internal hard drive. So the two drives are not thrashing. I don't have to deal with the disk head moving from one place and then back to the other place all the time. So now it's this is a lot faster than using the same hard drive for importing. 7 seconds. We are almost there.
It wouldn't load into RAM first. It wouldn't load into RAM first and then to the hard drive.
Then you need to have enough RAM to do it. Yeah. And these are pretty big files. So this is one way you can also back up your virtual machine, is to export it to an appliance file. So that way you can also use it for backup purposes, because it's not just backing up the disk image file, it's also backing up the configuration and all the other useful files. So it's a pretty good way to do it. Okay, so here's my client program. Now, when you do your homework assignment, the first part of the homework assignment doesn't do anything specific that requires reconfiguration, but I do want to emphasize how to do the reconfiguration part. So this is the part that you kind of have to pay some attention, and I will try to explain what we're doing here. Inside VirtualBox, before you start a virtual machine, this is what you need to do. Go to File, and then go to Preferences. Under Preferences, go to Network. And then under Network, go to Host Only Networks. Okay. So right now, I have one VBoxNet 0 defined already. You can do this in the Windows version of VirtualBox as well. Okay, so you can do it here inside on VirtualBox when it's running in Windows. If you don't have any entry already created, okay, if you have one entry created already, you can delete it. So I'm going to delete it, and then I'll create it again from scratch. So what we need is a host-only network, and what it does is this is a mechanism to allow the host environment, in this case, Linux, in Debian using my live distribution, to communicate with a virtual machine, but without that traffic to have any chance of leaking out onto an actual network. And this is good because we don't want our port scan to be viewable from the outside, just to make sure that nothing else is going to see the traffic. And misreport it as an attempt to compromise the system or anything like that. So when you click the plus icon here, it will create an entry. But this entry is not going to be 100% useful, simply because it will not give you a DHCP server by default, which you probably want to use. Otherwise, you will have to set up static IP addresses, which takes quite a few steps as well. So what I'll do is I'm going to show you guys how to set up your DHCP server inside VirtualBox so that you can use that feature when you're using host-only networks. So here we have, this is it looks like a screwdriver, and it allows you to edit host-only network. And this is what it looks like. I think this is the default, even when you're running in Windows. These are the defaults. What it's saying is the host itself will appear as 192.168.56.1 as a network, as an IP address. So in this case, this box, the physical box itself, will appear with this address when it is communicating with the virtual machine. Okay, it has nothing to do with your actual network connection to the internet. This is completely separate. It is only for communicating with the virtual machine. And that's the value is, we don't want to use the bridge mode, because, if you use bridge mode networking, that means your virtual machine is visible on the actual network. Any attack that you launch against that would now potentially be visible to the outside world. This will stay inside completely. The network mask is 25.25.255.255.255.0, which is basically a binary bit pattern that specifies which part of the IP address specifies the network part of the IP address, and then the zeros are basically specify which part is host only. I'm not going to go through too much of TCP/IP addressing scheme in this class, but I will go through enough to give you a general idea of how it works. In TCP/IP, it is a specific protocol that allows you to talk to another machine through a network of networks. Okay, and that's why the name, intranet and not intranet. So when you specify an IP address, it is usually specified as 4 numbers, each one going from 0 to 255. Now, the reason why it's going from 0 to 255 is because 255 is the largest or maximum number you can specify with 8 bits or 8 binary digits. Okay. So in this case, the IP address of the host, which is the virtual machine, excuse me, not the virtual machine, but the actual machine itself, is 192.168.56.1. Okay, and each one has a binary pattern associated with it. Okay, I'm not going to talk about base conversion in this class, even though in some other classes, base conversion, is a very important topic. But this entire address is broken up into 2 parts. Okay, the first part in this case is 192.168.56. This is called the network address, and then this part here is called the host address within the network. What a bit mask does, okay, in this case our bit mask is 255.255.255.0, which is a very easy number to work with, because we are designating the first 3 numbers as the network address and the last number as the host within the network. Okay. That is needed so that we can differentiate and say, okay, which machine with what type of IP address is considered to be within the same subnet. If two machines are not within the same subnet, they need a router in order to get the traffic across to the other subnet. Okay. So that's why these numbers are significant and important when we need to configure anything that is related to TCP/IP. And by the way, what is IP? What does IP stand for? Internet Protocol, exactly. And the whole term of internet refers to a network of networks. Okay, and that's why there's a concept of a subnet, which is the smallest, which is the lowest level of networks. You have to build from that construct. Now, if you click on the second tab, which is DHCP server, it is by default disabled. In other words, this check box here is by default cleared, which means if you use this type of networking, you only have one option. If you have this turned off, you have to use static IP. If you use static IP, then you have to set up static IP on the virtual machine, which is not very difficult, but still, it is you have to go through a few configurations files to get it to work. So it is useful to also understand this process just so that we know how to do it. So once you click the checkbox, it will enable DHCP. DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, which basically means when a computer wakes up, instead of having a static IP or static information pre-programming how it should talk in a network, it is going to go to a server, a DHCP server, and basically ask the server, hey, this is my MAC address, my hardware physical address, and it's asking the DHCP server and say, okay, what is supposed to be my IP address? What is the net mask? Where's my gateway? Who is supposed to be my DNS server, and so on and so forth. And the DHCP server will basically feed all that information to the computer that is asking, okay, how should I set up myself in this network? Okay, most of the time when you use computers at home and also at school, most of these computers are set up to use a DHCP server to get its IP address and all the other useful information related to connecting to the internet. In this case, we have to specify the server address to be something other than the other address. So when you look at the adapter, we want to specify something other than this address, but anything other than that is going to be okay. So what we'll do is we'll pick the next available address, which is 192.168.56.2. Okay, so I'm just picking the next available number here. The server mask is going to be the same, which is 255.255.255.0. Lower address bound is basically asking you when additional machines want to join this network and asking the DHCP server, what should be my IP address? This is the lowest number that you can assign as an IP address. You can specify any number that starts with 192.168.56. something. Okay, other than 0, 1, and 2, because those are now reserved. 1 is reserved for the host itself, 2 is reserved for the DHCP server. So practically speaking, you should start with 3 or more. I'll just be safe and pick 10. Upper address bound is basically where does it end. In theory, you can end with 254, not 255. Okay, 255 is the broadcast address. You cannot use that. So you have to use 192.168.56, and then the last number, I'll just pick 20 because I'm not going to have 20 or 10 virtual machines connected to this network here. So picking 20 is plenty already. So this would be a typical setup for your homework assignment. Are we still doing okay so far with the concept and also the steps to get it done? Okay. So I just click OK here. And I click OK here, and for the time being, I don't have to use it. Okay, I'm just going to leave it alone and not use it at all. But I do want to double check and make sure that. So I want to select the virtual machine for this class, the same one that you have been using for homework assignments. Click Settings, and at this point, I want to make sure that the network. Go to the network part here, and make sure that it is not using host only. Okay. I want it to use NAT, just NAT, NAT, which is the default. The reason why I want to use NAT and not host only is because I still need internet access to bring all the packages up to date and install some additional packages. Okay, if you choose host only, unless you configure the host as a gateway, no traffic is going to go out to the internet. Okay. Are there any questions about these choices? Now, let me just go ahead and choose, host only. So this way I can show you what happens when you choose host only. As soon as you choose host only adapter here, the name, you will have a drop-down box to choose the name. Since I only have one single host only adapter or host only setup configured, it will only choose VBox Net 0. We don't have to mess around with advanced at all in this case, so we'll just go ahead and it's okay to choose a promiscuous mode to be denied, but if you really want to configure a IDS server or an IDS system, you want to turn this on and basically say allow all, because that's the only way an IDS system can work, is to see all traffic within that subnet. But for our homework assignment, it's not going to matter because we don't have any other machine on that network. But you can choose all, allow all, and that will be fine. Okay, we'll click OK, and I'll go ahead and start this machine. And it should look like what you should see when you start up your virtual machine, because I'm using the machine that basically resembles what you should be seeing for your homework assignment. My passphrase is hoping that's the one. Yep. All right, so it's starting up. I have the snort already installed, which is okay. Okay, and I want to show you ifconfig. ifconfig you can only quote unquote only run it when you're logged in as root. There are other ways to run it even when you're a regular user, but typically, when we deal with stuff like this, we have to log in as root anyway. And you can see the IP address right now is 192. I cannot use my pointer when it's inside this window, but you can see here, inet ADDR is 192.168.56.10 because that is the lowest number that the DHCP can assign for any particular machine asking, okay, what should be my IP address. I'll be making any connections here between what I did earlier and what I'm doing now. Okay, so the big question, which I think cannot happen, is go out to the internet. So the only way, or one quick and easy way to check it, is to try to ping google.com. And it says unknown host google.com because DNS is not even set up at this point. Now I can also try to ping something that has a known IP address, like the power server on this campus is 165.196.78.8, and it says network is unreachable because I don't have a gateway set up. I can only communicate with the host and other virtual machines connected to VBox Net 0. Okay, so that means all traffic between the host environment and this virtual machine is now contained within the machine itself. None of that is actually going out because there's no ability to go out at all. But right now it's not going to be helpful because what I want to do is I'm going to uninstall Snort and a few other software here. So nmap will also be uninstalled here. When you try to uninstall something, there are several ways to uninstall. You can say remove is one word to use, purge is the other word. When you say remove, it will only remove the executables and all the library files that can be reinstalled, but it will keep the configuration files. So you don't have to reconfigure when you reinstall that software. When you say purge, it will remove everything, including the configuration files, which is my intent, is to purge it so that I don't have any traces left of what was installed here. Yep, go ahead.
Before you reinstall it, don't you have to type in the command update DB?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. But I want to kind of start with a blank slate, and I ran this virtual machine to test the instructions, so that's why it already has certain components installed already, and I want to get rid of all of this stuff first.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Because the reason I asked is because if I don't do update DB for some reason, received the same files from purged program. Like it knows.
Right, because it is it only knows about the version that you have updated to. So until you do update, it doesn't know there's a new version available. Yep. Okay. So now that I have no network access, I have to go back and change the settings just so that it can go back and use NAT, which stands for Network Address Translation. And then I can restart my virtual machine, and this time I will have internet access from inside the virtual machine. Okay. So we'll get rid of these question marks here. And I'm going to log in as root again. And type the command ifconfig, and you can see that this time the internet address is completely different. It is 10.0.2.15. This is a typical address that is assigned when I use NAT or network address translation. So the next thing I want to do is to ping google.com to see if I can reach out to the internet, and this time I have no problem. Okay, so the DNS server is set up correctly, the gateway is set up correctly, I can actually reach out to the internet. But I cannot reach this virtual machine from the host environment anymore. Okay, so I can only do certain things within using this configuration, and I'll have to do something else, with the other configuration. Okay, for your homework assignment, you will have to install certain packages from the Debian repository. To do that, the first thing you want to do is to do an aptitude update. And what aptitude update does is it will download the latest catalogs of all the packages available from Debian. It doesn't install anything, it just updates the catalog. The second command you have to run is called upgrade and not update. What upgrade does is it will take a look at the packages that are already installed in the system and see which one has an updated version. So it will just bring those packages up to date using upgrade. Okay, so you want to kind of keep your system up to date by using both update and upgrade. First, you have to use update to download the latest catalogs, and then you use upgrade to actually download and install the latest version of packages that you have installed in your system already. And because I did it like in the afternoon, just a few hours ago, so there's nothing really for me to upgrade. But for most of you, you will probably see a whole list of packages that have newer versions available. Just say yes, I want to bring everything up to date. It's all good. Okay. Are there any questions at this point about aptitude update and aptitude upgrade, what they're useful for, and why you need to do that? Questions? All right. So for your homework assignment, you will have to install Snort. Okay. So you just say aptitude install Snort, S-N-O-R-T. In general, if you know the name of the package that you want to install, you can use this command to do it. Some of you probably have used Ubuntu or some of the other GUI tools, related to Linux or Debian type of distribution. I personally like, command line programs, so I, just use, aptitude to do most of the work. But obviously, if you have a GUI, you can also use the GUI tools to do exactly the same thing. So when I try to install Snort, you will see a whole bunch of other packages that also need to be installed. And that's okay, that is actually expected, because Snort requires a lot of support, libraries, tools, and whatnot. So don't be surprised, when you try to install Snort, it will bring up this page and say, well, you will also have to install all of these files. It's perfectly okay. So if you're okay with this, you just specify uppercase Y for yes, press the enter key, and it will download everything. When you install Snort, one of the questions it will ask you is what is considered the local area network, okay? Because it needs to differentiate what is local traffic and what is traffic that is not considered local, okay? We'll talk about this in the homework assignment. There will be instructions of how to set this up. So for the time being, you can just take the default. It doesn't really bother it. So you can just press the enter key and take the default. We will learn basically how to edit it later on. Okay. And now Snort is up and running, it's okay. And the way you can check whether Snort is running is to go to etc/etc/init.d snort, and then you just type status. And it tells me that the status of Snort daemon is it is monitoring ETH0, the Ethernet connection to ETH0, and it's running just fine. Are there any questions at this point about how to set up the client machine, or the test machine that you have to set up? Now I want to test whether Snort is working or not. So the first thing I want to do, which is the easiest thing I can do, is to do a port scan on myself, okay, and see if it will trigger anything. To do a port scan, one tool that I can use is called Nmap, and Nmap is currently not installed in this, virtual machine. That's okay. We just learned how to install stuff, right? So we can just go to Aptitude and say install Nmap, which is the name of the package also. It's the name of the executable. It's also the name of the package. So we'll go ahead and install this. It will ask me, whether I want to also install the other tools required by the other packages also required by Nmap. Just answer yes. Yep. Okay. So I got everything installed at this point, and I can now run Nmap. Nmap is a pretty capable program with a gazillion options. But to do the basic port scan, I just need to point it to a particular IP address. One IP address that is always there is 127.0.0.1, which is known as localhost. Okay, so almost every machine with a network connection or network-capable operating system has this address already predefined. It's also called a loopback address. So I can scan the loopback and say, okay, we got these ports open. So this is actually a tool that people use for port scanning. It will basically scan through the first 1,000 ports, the low number of ports, basically starting from 1 to 1,000. And in this case, it's showing that 2 of those 1,000 ports is open and something is answering. The first one is port 22, which is SSH, and then the second one is SMTP. SMTP is Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, which is kind of dangerous if you think about it, because if you do not configure your SMTP server carefully, you can end up being the gateway for spammers to use your machine to deliver spam messages to the entire world. So this looks like this machine is having a problem, but we'll see that it's not actually a big problem. Okay, but the other thing I want to know is whether Snort is looking at this and go like, hey, somebody just port scanned me, there's a problem. And to check that, without using a GUI tool or a web server, you will have to look at the log file that is created by Snort. It is located in /var/log snort alert. Okay, so that's a text file. If there's anything there, that means Snort has noticed something has happened, and you should know about it. Right now the file is empty because cat is a command to type the content of a file, and as a result of the cat command, it didn't show anything. So there's no alert at this point. Okay, Snort did not think there's anything wrong. The reason is simple. 127.0.0.1, which is a local port, is not considered a part of the network that can cause issues. So I can port scan myself all day long, and Snort says it's okay. You might be just doing some tests on this system, so it doesn't really classify that as a problem. Okay. What about the IP address that we see in ifconfig? In this case, it's 10.0.2.15. Let's do that. Let's do a port scan on that particular IP address, 10.0.2.15. And first of all, you can see that it's different. This time it's only reporting SSH is an open port. What about SMTP? It's not on this list anymore. That's because when the system by default configures the email server, it is only configuring the email server to listen locally. It is not opening up, it's not listening to any actual network address, it's only listening to localhost, which is a local address, so it's relatively safe. So in this case, we don't have anything too dangerous going on here, but we also want to see whether Snort is reporting that it is getting a port scan. And it is still reporting nothing. Okay, even though 10.0.2.15 is corresponding to the Ethernet port, it's still saying it is okay because it is the same address as this particular machine, so it's not classified as an external address. So everything is fine. Do we have any questions at this point? So what I really need to do is to use another machine to launch a port scan on the virtual machine. Okay, so my first choice is the host environment, which is whatever environment you use to run your virtual machine. Most of you will be running Windows, but some of you are running Ubuntu or some other versions or some other distributions of Linux. Okay, so the first thing we want to do when we're in the host environment, which is what this command line is now located, is to see, can we even see the virtual machine? Can I ping, or can I even see that particular address? So that address is 10.0.2.15, and I cannot see a single thing. Okay, I can look at ifconfig in the host environment. Oops, I'm a regular user. As a regular user, you can always specify the path to ifconfig and actually still run it. So it is under sbin, and then you can just type ifconfig and actually run it also. And in this case, it is reporting that I have, this is my address. To the outside world, this machine is known as 165.196.197. There's my loopback, local loopback, which is 127.0.0.1. And here is the other network known as VBoxNet0. This is my host-only network. And none of these is matching 10.0.2.15. So no wonder I cannot see my virtual machine. So what we need to do now to expose the virtual machine to the host-only network, which is 192.168.56 something, is this. Okay, so we need to go back to the virtual machine and power it down, because you can make changes all you want when the machine is running. It's not going to be effective until you restart the machine. So I might as well turn it off first, do the configuration, and then restart the machine. So I go to VirtualBox, make sure this client is selected, go to settings, go to network, change the adapter 1 from NAT to host only adapter, and then click OK, and then restart the machine. Okay. So it will take a little bit of time to restart it, not long. I just have to retype my password. Okay, let me get rid of these warnings first. Oh, got it wrong this time. Here we go. Okay, so it seems like the machine started up the same way as before, but when I log in as root and do an ifconfig, ifconfig, you can see that my address is now 192.168.56.10, which is very close to the host, which has an IP address of 192.168.56.1. Okay, so I'm going to keep this window up. Okay, I'm going to put it down here just so that we can see the iNet address part. And I go back to the host here, and you can see from the host perspective, the host has an interface. It's kind of like a virtual network interface card, the VBoxNet0. It's kind of like a virtual network address, network interface card, and it has an IP address of 196.168.56.1, and the virtual machine on the other hand is down here. It has an IP address of 192.168.56.10, and based on the bit mask that I specify, I know that these two IP addresses are on the same subnet. And machines or hosts on the same subnet, they can always see each other. Okay, so I want to test to see whether the host machine, or the host environment can see the virtual machine. The most basic way to run it is to ping it, because I did not disable pinging or responses to ping. So the easiest way is to ping it. So I can now ping 192.168.56.10, which is the IP address of the virtual machine, and it's connecting. Okay, the host environment can see the virtual machine, and the other way around is okay as well. Okay, so let me go back to the virtual machine, and from the virtual machine I want to ping the host environment. So I can ping 192.168.56.1, and the ping is successful as well. So now we have a connection, a general network connection between the host environment and the virtual machine. So now I can start to launch, port scans and all sorts of stuff to the virtual machine. Now that part is really your homework assignment, so I'm not going to show you too much, except for the ability to run nmap from here. So I can run nmap, which is already installed in this particular environment on that particular IP address, which is 192.168.56.10. And it reports that you can only see that SSH is an open port. I will not show you what the virtual machine is really seeing, what snort is seeing, because that's actually part of the answer that you have to figure out for your homework assignment. But this is how your homework assignment is set up for snort, is to use the host environment as a platform to port scan the virtual machine. Are there any questions about the nature of the homework assignment, or how to set it up so that your host environment can see the virtual machine and be able to scan it? No questions? All of these are a part of the instruction, and the lecture itself is also getting recorded. So I think you guys will be okay if you just kind of follow the steps one by one. Okay? All right.
Tuesday by 5:20, right? Tuesday by 5:20, right?
Tuesday.
What day is this day?
This is due in.
The new assignment is going to be due when?
This one is due in a week. So
Okay.
almost all the homework assignments, I will give you 1 week to work on it. So this one is due 1 week from today. So that will be next Thursday. Yep. Yep.
I don't know if I did something wrong, but I don't think there's a Debian package for IMFS anymore.
Really? Well, let me double check. Aptitude. And look for clam FS. It's still there. I would check in another way just to be sure. Okay. You can go to the Debian website, debian.org, and then we go to Debian packages and look for clam FS, and that's based on package name. And it doesn't show. Maybe it's just not in the stable one. Let me see if it is available in other distributions.
It's in testing.
Can we still
Okay.
access it if it's in testing?
Well,
I downloaded the tar and then got the dependencies. It won't compile with GCC 4.7 either, so it's kind of
okay.
Yeah,
That's
would be problem.
that's a good point. Okay. Okay, so does that mean that this homework assignment is useless? Well, not quite. Okay. You can bring your virtual machine to testing instead of stable. Okay, so I'm going to teach you guys how to do that, because in order to get the clam FS homework assignment done, you will have to do that. Thank you for reporting that problem. Yep.
Could we check to see if it's in Ubuntu? It seems to be in.
Probably. I mean, the two distributions are not necessarily synchronized. So just because it's not in the stable version of Debian doesn't mean that it's not in the quote-unquote equivalent stable version of Ubuntu.
Right.
Okay. So what I do want to do is to show you guys how to get it to work. So let me go back to my own virtual machine, and I should be using the same version, which is stable, as all of you. So I'm going to look for clam FS and make sure it does not exist, and it does not. Okay, so that's good, because I have exactly the same environment as all of you, running your virtual machine. So what I need to do is to change my distribution from stable to testing. Okay, now it's not going to be a very difficult process, but you do have to kind of understand, how to get it done and follow the steps, one by one. All right. But in order to do this, I would need internet access, and right now my virtual machine cannot access the internet. So the first thing I need to do is really to turn it off, so I can go back to NAT, or network address translation, before I come back and redo this part. So I go to VirtualBox right here, and I go to settings, go to network, go to adapter 1, and change it back to NAT. Click OK, start the virtual machine again. And use my password to sign in because I have an encrypted partition. Right. Alright, so I'm in my virtual machine. Unfortunately, the text that it uses, well, I can switch to full screen mode. The virtual machine window will now be switched to full screen mode. You can go back to windowed mode at any time by pressing Host plus F. Okay, so we'll remember that. Doesn't really help a whole lot, does it? Host plus F.
Control.
Nah.
Yeah, it's right control.
Right control. Is it H or F?
Yeah.
Nope, it's not doing it.
Escape.
Nope. Oh, right control, sorry. I was using left. There we go. I cannot follow instructions. Okay. So I will log in as root. Oh, not root. I'll log in as root. And okay. So this part is very important. It's being recorded so you can actually do the freeze frame and actually know what command I'm typing. So what we need to do is to change a file that controls which repository we are using for this particular installation. That file is under /etc/apt/sources.list. That is a text file that shows you where we are getting the catalog files from. So we'll go there first. Okay, I don't have Vim, I have VI though. Most of you probably want to use Nano instead of VI, unless you know VI already. It has a rather steep learning curve, so Nano is a little bit easier. So this is just a regular text file. So what we want to do is to change all references to Wheezy to testing, or the equivalent name of testing. What is the code name of testing right now? No, SID is always unstable. Oh. There's a reason why SID is always unstable. It's from Toy Story. Yep. It's okay. We don't have to know exactly what the code name is, because it will take the code name or the testing as the name of the distribution. So what we want to do is to change all references to Wheezy to testing. So we are just, I can do this with a single command in VI, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go through each one and change each reference to Wheezy to testing. And we'll change this one too. Okay. Oops. Typo. All right. This one is Jesse. Okay, so Jesse is the same as testing. So you can change all the references to Wheezy to either Jesse, or you can change them to testing. Both approach will work just fine. Okay. Now changing this text file doesn't do a whole lot, because this is really just a text file that is used by Aptitude, apt-get, and all the other tools. So once you change this, what you need to do is to first save the file before you get out of the editor. And the next thing we have to do is to run aptitude update. Just update, not upgrade. And this will basically re-download the catalog of all the files, but this time from a slightly different source. It is still going to the same website, but it's downloading a different catalog this time. Instead of downloading the catalog of Wheezy, it's now getting the catalog of testing or Jesse. They are basically the same thing, different names for the same thing. So once this is downloaded, which didn't take a whole lot of time, I have just updated the catalog, okay? But the installed files are still basically the same as before. So to bring the entire system up to date to a different distribution, what you need to do is to run aptitude, but this time not just upgrade, you have to use save upgrade. And the exact differences between upgrade and save upgrade, I'm not 100% sure, but I know that every time you want to do a distribution upgrade, you should run either save upgrade or distribution upgrade, dist-upgrade. And when you run this, there'll be a lot of stuff, okay? It's basically saying, all of these packages need to be downloaded and reinstalled, and after unpacking, 300 megabytes of files or an addition of 300 megabytes of file of space will be used. Are we okay with this process?
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So it will take a little bit of time depending on your depending on your network connection, or the speed of network connection. But I'm going to just run this right now. The internet connection speed is pretty good here, and the machines are relatively fast. So you can see that I can download everything in just about 2 minutes. And that's because I didn't have the GUI installed. If you have GNOME or anything like that installed, this process will take significantly longer. Because once you bring in a GUI, there'll be like tons of stuff that you have to upgrade. But without a GUI, it's relatively quick to upgrade to a different distribution. So have you guys upgraded your Internet Explorer to the fixed version?
I don't use Internet Explorer.
Very good. That makes your computer more secure already, just by not using Internet Explorer.
They send out a patch upgrade for it?
Yeah, the upgrade is released sometime earlier today. Well, it took them long enough, though. I mean, the problem was discovered last Saturday, and today is Thursday, so it took them Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and took them 4 to 5 days to come up with that update.
For the homeworks, or for the future homeworks, are any of them going to be dependent on Debian? Like if I use other distros, it vary?
It's going to be based on the virtual machine that I ask you guys to set up. So it will work better if you use Debian. If you don't use Debian, then the message that is displayed may be different. All right. Oh, well, while it is doing this, I just want to go back to my website. There's some additional stuff that might be useful to you. It's kind of optional. This one is a link to a document that talks about how to set up a smooth sec. What is interesting about this website? Okay.
Is this your blog?
No, this is not. It's somebody else's blog. But this blog also has some other interesting links. So I want you guys to kind of go through this side here. This guy has offensive security certified expert certificate, and if you look down this list here, this guy has some really interesting material to read. Let me see, if you click on, I cannot remember which link I clicked on, but I just clicked on the blog itself. It talked about the heartbleed problem, but there were a few links that were quite interesting that I was reading and go like, that is cool. There are projects, exploits, exploit database. Okay. There was one link that he wrote about how to install a rootkit, how to make your own rootkit. And I felt that was kind of interesting. It's well beyond the scope of most people who have not taken programming classes. But for those of you who have taken 1 or 2 programming classes, you might find it to be quite interesting. So anyway, I just felt that that was kind of interesting that somebody had blogged about all that stuff, and it's actually quite useful. I only have 30 seconds left, and we'll be we will have brought our system up to date once these files are downloaded and installed. Then we'll have the testing version of Debian installed instead of the stable version. Are there any questions about the different distributions in Debian? The different the various distributions. One is called stable, one is testing, one is unstable, and that's experimental as well. No questions?
Is there any downside to using testing that we just upgraded?
I personally have not seen any real downside to using testing. For the most part, you get the more up-to-date software, but you do not have the instability of using unstable. So testing is, to me, is a happy middle ground. To some people, maybe not. They feel more secure using just the stable version. But I use unstable on all of my distributions. Okay, so right now, this is a message that I have to acknowledge. It says CA certificates, and this one it's basically updating the certificate data. So I can press Q to move on, and now it's continuing with the installation of the packages. To move from one distribution to the next, it's kind of like upgrading, Windows from XP to Vista, or from Vista to 7. But you can see that in Debian, it's relatively easy to move up to the next distribution. Takes a little bit of time because there are a lot of files to expand. Remember, 300 megabytes will be used. And it will also usually bring the kernel, the operating system kernel itself up to date, which also means a reboot would be nice to have. It's not 100% necessary, but typically a reboot would be appropriate after the upgrade is done. Right. So while it is doing this, I'm going to go back and try to look for the rootkit discussion. It's called rootkit 101. So let me see if I can just find rootkit here on this page. Rootkit. Oh, there we go. It's under Linux rootkits series, and and the first one is writing Linux rootkits 101. And if you bring up that page, it's it's a very good detailed discussion of how to get a rootkit installed, or how to write a rootkit to begin with, using a driver. Okay, using a driver as a way to get into the system and get a rootkit installed. So it's pretty interesting read for those of you who want to read something like that. In this class, have I talked about Elmo in this class? No? Okay.
Elmo?
Elmo, yeah, Elmo.
From Sesame Street?
No, no. Elmo is also the first name of a rear admiral.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I thought it was like one of those funny, ironic hacker names for like Chewbacca.
Not quite. No, Elmo is the name of an admiral. So if you look up Elmo and James Kirk, no, not T. Okay, definitely not T. Just James Kirk and Elmo. You will bring up something interesting. It will bring up a web page of USS Zumwalt. And Elmo is the first name of Admiral, Zumwalt, who's, I guess, famous for something. But this is an interesting destroyer because the bridge of this particular destroyer is Linux powered.
Wow.
Yep. So we are looking at a armed Linux data center that is floating, and it can go, anywhere.
So if this is the first one to use Linux, what would they have used before?
Say again?
If this is the first one to use Linux, what would they have used before? Windows?
I would assume it's either Windows or some other custom, proprietary operating systems. But I would not be surprised if Windows is actually used on some of the ships still in Surface right now.
It doesn't say here in the wiki that it's on Linux.
It doesn't say what? Linux?
Yeah, I did a Control F Linux and it didn't.
Well, then you look up, Zoom Vault, and Linux.
Wow.
Then you will have tons of web pages, popping up to talk about, how Linux is being used, in this particular destroyer.
So are the people still on board driving it, or is it all Linux based?
Say it again?
Yeah, are there still going to be people on it then?
Oh yeah, there will be people on it. I mean, they still have to have people to move around, to move equipment and ammunition around, So but it's an interesting ship because the shape itself is also kind of interesting. It resembles, I think, one of the ships in the Civil War period that has this kind of inverted design. People gave up on this kind of design, thinking that it cannot withstand storms and heavy waves, in heavy conditions. But they tested I think a 50% scale of this ship in heavy sea conditions, and it held up just fine. So I think they are okay with that idea now. So anyway, for those of you who like to kind of study up on warships and whatnot, this thing has got some really interesting items on it. They originally intended to build 21 of these, and they downsized that list to 3. So there will only be 3 of these, types of warships built. I don't think they will actually see heavy action, because they're too expensive to see, any heavy action. But they will be testing it. I think they're testing the platforms. They will be testing the weaponry and stuff like that. The gun on this ship has a range of, if I remember correctly, about 50 miles. It's a 5-inch gun, but it has a range of 50 miles. And the ammunition itself is self-guiding. It's not self-powered. Okay, the propulsion is done as soon as it leaves the barrel. But after that, it has a self-guiding ability, so it can basically do its own little navigation. Not a whole lot, obviously, but it can still quote unquote steer itself and home into a target that is 50 miles away from the ship. So kind of interesting stuff, on this ship.
Is that like a railgun?
No, it's not a railgun. But funny thing, you should mention railgun. This ship also has the largest electrical generator of all warships. I guess excluding carriers, because those things have like 2 nuclear generators. But of all the ships about the same size, these ships actually have the largest electrical generator, which means it is built as a platform to test all kinds of weaponry that requires electrical energy. So I would not be surprised if they mount a test platform on these things for laser and also for railguns. It's basically a lab, setting. Raytheon is the company that made the control system, and they have switched over to use Linux already. And I think that's a really kind of significant thing for people who want to study Linux, because it's basically saying Linux is no longer just an operating system that very few people would use. It's basically mainstream now. So let's go back and check our virtual machine. All right, it's all done. Tripwire, okay, I have Tripwire already installed on this thing, so that's why it keeps asking for this. But you won't see it because you probably won't have the Tripwire already installed. So we're almost done. I use this virtual machine for testing a lot of different things, so that's why I probably have packages that you don't have installed already on your own virtual machine. Okay. So when they ask you where to install grub, you can just go ahead and select both the device itself and also the partition. We're getting there, almost done. It's still kind of lengthy, but I think it beats upgrading from Windows 7 to Windows 8, or from Windows 8 to 8.1. I heard that is also a somewhat painful process. Is anyone running Windows 8.1?
Yeah, they made me, I did it and I regretted it forever.
Forever.
What's
Okay.
wrong with 8.1?
Okay, it's encountering some problems, but that's okay because those problems are all associated with Snort, and none of you, should have Snort installed already, so that you should not see this problem. But the one thing I want to make sure is ClamFS should now be available. So I'm going into, and ClamFS is available now. So I just brought my virtual machine up from stable to testing now. Now the best way to do it is to refer to the code name, and I'll explain why that is the case. Okay, so I'm going to go back to etc/etc/apt/sources.list. Oh, once again, I don't have Vim installed, I have VI installed. They're slightly different. Okay, so the only reason why you want to refer to the code name, which is Jesse, instead of the functional name, which is testing, is because testing keeps shifting. So when Debian is ready to release the next version of the operating system, what they're going to do is they will make Jesse stable and then make another name to be testing. They never change SID. Okay, SID is always unstable. So if you want your system to be kind of stable, not stable, but to be consistent, then you want to change references to testing to the code name, which is Jesse, Jesse in this case. And since I'm using VI and I know the command, I can change all of those at the same time. But you can go ahead and just change it one by one. It will be the same thing. Any type of aptitude update and upgrade should not bring any new packages in, because Jesse is testing at this point. But this also IE. Okay. Thank you. Change Jesse to JESSIE. There we go. And I just want to double check. If the update works, then it should be okay. It's just an alias of testing for the time being. Yep, it's all working. Cool. So, do you guys want me to write down these instructions? I can do that. All right. So I'm just going to test whether I can install ClamFS, and I can. That would be good. All right. Any other questions regarding ClamFS or the other homework assignments? Questions?
Once we switch to testing,
There's no easy way to switch back. So once you move on, from an older version of Debian to a newer version of Debian, there's no easy way or safe way to move back to an earlier version. Yep. And as I said earlier, you probably want to do a reboot too, because let's take a look at which version of Linux we are running here. There are several ways to do it. This is the way that I do it, is to do a cat on the file called /proc/version, which is one of the many ways to do this. So I'm running kernel version 3.2.0, which is a kind of a fairly old kernel of Linux. So what I want to do is to reboot it first and then see what is the new version of the kernel, because I should have updated the kernel as well at this point. So I'm going to reboot, restart.
Probably be a good idea to create a snapshot in VirtualBox before you mess up.
Yep. And my password is guess not. go. So I'm gonna cat /proc/version again, and this time it's 3.13.-1-486. So the kernel has updated, already as well. So after you do a distribution upgrade, it's always a good idea to reboot the machine because very likely the kernel is upgraded as well. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? Does it look very painful to bring Debian up to another version? Bring it up to should not be. That's the easy thing to do. All right. So let's go back to our homework assignment. So what I'll do is I'm going to unhide the IDS homework assignment so that you guys can start to work on it as soon as you want to get started with this one. This one, is only going in one direction, so you don't want to, rely on the ability to go back and forth. There are only, I think, 6 questions to this one, so it's not even a heavy-duty type of homework assignment. I want to change the visibility. Save. So now you should be able to see it, and the due date is in a week. You can get started, and spend the next, 6 days or so, working on it. You don't have to answer everything in one single shot. Well, Vincent just mentioned something about snapshotting. Does everybody understand what is snapshotting? No. It's kind of a backup, but it works a little bit better than a backup. Okay, so let me kind of show you what it means to have a snapshot. Okay, so I have the virtual machine still running here. So while the virtual machine is still running, you can go to machine, and then you can go to take snapshot. Unfortunately, they put take snapshot right before take screenshot to make people think that they are about the same thing, but they're entirely different. A screenshot is really, guess what? A screenshot. Okay, so you can send somebody a screenshot and say, okay, it's not working, and this is what I'm seeing on my screen. That's what a screenshot is. A snapshot, on the other hand, let me click that button first. Okay, a snapshot, on the other hand, doesn't seem like much. Okay, it's just asking you for a name. But what you can do with a snapshot is you can go back to this snapshot in the future. Okay, so if I say, take a snapshot here, and I just call this snapshot 1, and you can enter a description here. Okay, tag is about to destroy is Linux installation. Okay, click OK. All right, it's going to take a while because what the system is doing right now is backing up all of the files at this point. Okay. So now that I have a snapshot set up, I'm going to go do something, destructive to this machine. So I'm going to go to the root folder and say rm-rf, let's pick something important, user bin. Okay, that's where most of the executables are located. So I'm going to do this, and if that is not enough, I'll go do something else in /sbin. Okay, so I'm going to destroy the entire folder sbin, which contains a lot of useful and important commands. So at this point, my distribution should be not very functional anymore. The kernel is still there, but the kernel is not going to be very helpful or useful without these executables. In other words, I can't even do ifconfig because that command, guess what, has just been destroyed. Okay. Are there any questions about what I have done to my own virtual machine? So now the question is, well, how is the snapshot going to help me? Okay, so if I go to machine here, I have to shut it down first. So let me go ahead and shut down the machine. So I'll do a close, and I don't even need to save my machine state because it's already kind of damaged. So I'll just go ahead and power down the machine without saving anything. Oh, here's an option already. You can see that I have the option here to restore current snapshot, snapshot 1, the one that I have taken right before I do all the destruction. So let's go ahead and click that option and power down the machine at the same time. I'm going to click OK, and then go back to VirtualBox and restart the machine here. Okay. Restoring, and it's all done. And the first thing I want to run is ifconfig, and it's back. So this is a really nifty feature. How long did it take to take that snapshot? Did it take a few minutes? Maybe 30 seconds, something like that. It's a quick and easy way to establish a point, a backup point that you can easily restore to, at any point. And just like, how many people play games like StarCraft or something like that, where before you start a campaign, you want to make sure that, okay, I want to be able to back up to this point, because just in case I did not have the right number of units or the right kind of units, I can back up to this point and rebuild, so I don't have to start from the very beginning of the game. Same thing with snapshots. Okay, so before you do anything that can potentially be bad and you want to be able to restore to this point, save a snapshot first. Okay, are there any questions about snapshotting? It's quick, it's easy. If you have the virtual machine up and running already, it just takes a few seconds to establish a snapshot. In case you do something that you want to say, I wish I didn't do that, if you have a snapshot taken before you did that, guess what? You can restore. Okay. Now the other thing you can also do, I'm going to power down this virtual machine first. The other thing you can also do, if you want to distribute a virtual machine to other people so they can run exactly the same thing using the same settings, the other way to do it is to click File and then use Export Appliance. This one will back up everything. It's going to take a lot longer. Okay, but what it does is allowing you to set up a virtual machine as an appliance. In other words, it is completely self-contained, and send it to somebody else or post it onto the internet, or make it available through BitTorrent, so other people can download your virtual machine and they will be able to run your virtual machine the way you intended. Okay, they don't have to set up the network card and all kinds of stuff anymore, because it will preserve your settings in terms of how much RAM is allocated, the size of the hard drive, and so on. It will preserve all of your settings. But it's a longer process. It's not useful for intermediate, backup purposes. But if you want to export the machine or archive your machine, this is a good way to do it. All right. Any other questions? Thanks for the snapshot suggestion. It's really, really handy. How many people kind of thought that I would not be able to restore to the snapshot and my virtual machine would be a host? Nobody?
I hope you know what you're doing.
But those are reasons why we like virtual machines, because I would never do something like that to an actual machine. Even with full backup and stuff like that, I would not do that to an actual machine, because without the ability to take a snapshot and almost instantaneously, using only seconds to go back to the snapshot, I wouldn't do anything like that. That's just not very smart. All right, so if there are no questions, we are running out of time today. So I'll see you guys next Tuesday, and we'll get started on a different topic. Next week, I think at some point we will have to go over, okay, where is it? This topic here. Did we go over this one?
No.
Topic 9? Okay, so this is an interesting topic. It is not technical at all, but at the same time, it's something that we should be aware of. All right, so I'll see you guys next Tuesday. Have a nice weekend.
Can you please reset the GPG segment?
You want to reset it?
Please,
okay.
for me.
Can you send me an email?
Sure, when? Today?
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and send me an email, because well, I suppose I can still do it now because I have time to do it. And that is GPG?
GPG.
Okay. This one. You just want me to change your attempt, right? Remove your current attempt so you can...
Yeah, I didn't attempt anything, so... Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I see. Alright, so let's see. We want to do
Could you snapshot it here?
Yeah, you can.
Oh, okay.
Yep. It's not as handy because you have to do a Alt 2 to get into the console of the emulator itself, and then you have to type the command to actually do it.
Which is expected. It's kind of how we have used. And I looked at it and it's like.
Can you do one at a time, or you can do a lot of snapshot?
You can do successive snapshots. So you can establish multiple snapshots, and you can restore to any of the snapshots along that line of snapshots.
So we can see. Okay.
Yeah, it's really useful.
Yep. Nice.
Let's see. Quiz administration.
Edit settings.
Second one. User override. What's your name?
Sohail.
Oh, I think it's at the top. Add user override. Okay. So, and your last name?
Right there, Sohail Iqbal. You see on the right side, fourth
Item.
from the bottom.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, right there.
Okay, so I'm gonna.
Can I do Saturday, Sunday? Because I'm busy.
Say again?
Saturday, Sunday. So is it unlimited, or you can just open for tomorrow?
I can control the close time. Today is the first already, so I can close it on Saturday.
Oh, it's fine. Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bishop.
Save. Here we go.
Thank you, sir. Bishop. Have a nice day.
Yep. All right.
So, do you offer next semester the Linux classes? CISM 12022.
As far as I know, they're not offered.
Because they offer every 2 years.
I think Michael is trying to restructure all the classes. So you might want to talk to him and ask him instead. When we'll be offering the server classes. Last time they got canceled because we didn't.